Hello, everyone. I'm the director for our New Zealand registered not-for-profit called Common Knowledge. And why did we call it Common Knowledge? Because we have a firm belief that we all blink, we all cough, and we can all tighten up our muscles. And that there are some times when we all share something somewhat similar. So our trust has been known for 50 years because we and I and hundreds of fathers and mothers developed universal skills to prepare our pregnant body for birth and to use to work through our baby's birth journey. No matter how that unfolded, it didn't matter because 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another. So we could all have skills to do that activity. So it's sort of natural for me to think in terms of commonality. And anybody who has had COVID has a commonality. All had COVID. Some have been asymptomatic, some have had really acute COVID. And then there's long haul people. I'm sort of a long haul person because it's hard for me, really, as a naturopath, to tell whether the things that are happening in me are really directly related to COVID or not. And many of you are going to feel the same thing. We're just not certain. But it's becoming clearer in the research that long haul people have some similar symptoms. At first, when I started doing research about COVID in January and February of 2020, it was a respiratory disease. And then by May, people began to look at it a little bit differently. By June, July, it was perhaps a blood vessel disease because in autopsies they could see micro blood clots, and people had had some strokes and heart attacks that were COVID related, and others had this white stuff in their lungs when their lungs were x-rayed. So it became infinitely more serious if it was damaging the endothelial cells in our arteries. And then it's become clear that many symptoms that people have that are very erratic, the breathing dysfunction, the heart rate, the heart skipping around, the blood pressure, the fatigue, the anxiety, all of these things all have to do with our autonomic nervous system. Now, I chose not to learn anything medical or scientific, and I'm sort of what's called a trivia researcher. So before I did this, I looked up, is the autonomic nervous system the same as the sympathetic nervous system? And it actually includes both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So if you know nothing of either of them, you would assume that the sympathetic nervous system is the happy one. But you, like me, would be wrong. So the sympathetic nervous system is the fright, flight, fight, and freeze. And many of us are in that mode having COVID because that virus is new to our body. And anything that is new is unsettling to us. We know that emotionally, we know that mentally, and we know that in our body. So even if we get sick with something that our body recognizes, our body goes into some form of immune reaction, which is part of the autoimmune system, and is trying to deal with it. And the question that came to mind for me from the moment I got sick in March of 2020 is, what could I do to help myself? And I've posted that in the beginning of these playlists. And if you want to know more about it, then find these playlists on the Facebook long haul groups. I should have, let's see if I can put them up here actually. Hold on. I may be able to. Yep. So I can put one up and I can put the other one up. Okay, so this is what I originally posted. This is self-help. If you feel you're getting COVID, and please pass this around. And it also has some breathing exercises on it. So I did this every single day for that whole 20 days when I was sick with acute COVID. And then I continued to do this and periodically continued to do it, particularly the rehydration, particularly cleaning out my nose, a lot of breathing stuff, particularly showering if my skin feels sticky. I do this not because I'm going to cure myself or because I'm going to eliminate this virus because I'm going to help my body. Now, my body includes my autonomic nervous system, my sympathetic and my parasympathetic. Parasympathetic is the calm part. And this is what I want all of you to know. Your mind, your emotions, and your body are you. The medical profession, rightly or wrongly, and our trust common knowledge is not anti-medical. We're not anti-anything. We just believe you should use everything you can. And you also need to know something about the medical profession. They are very specialized. We like that about them, but it can be very irritating, particularly with people with long-haul COVID. I've heard a lot of people say, I went to my therapist, they want to give me antidepressants, and they say, I know that this is physical. And so they go to their cardiologist, and their cardiologist gives them something to depress their heart rate. They're actually not giving them the same medicine, but they're giving them medicines that do the same thing, which is to suppress the sympathetic nervous system to permit the parasympathetic, the calmer part of us, to rise up. And so therefore, we're all asking ourselves, are we going down the medical route? The doctors right now really don't know what to do with long-haul people. So we have a choice. We can take what they suggest, see how that works, which is fine for us, fine for me. I have no judgment about your life. I care about mine. I care about my family's life as you care about yours. But you don't really care about how I feel. You may have a little empathy and sympathy about it, but really you're just trying to get on with your life. So if you're happy with doing that and that's all you want to do, then just go do that. That's not a problem. See how you feel. It's the self-evaluation. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? And because we're a trust called common knowledge, we say use everything and anything. So if you use the medical stuff, that's fine. If you say, I don't want to use anything about self-help, we don't care. Okay? And you can do nothing. You can also use lots of self-help along with anything or nothing in the medical thing. And in the description is an article that was sent to me by a long-haul person from the Atlantic that talked about long-haul symptoms. And it's a very long article. It's a brilliant article. And it comes back to something that I want to talk to you about, which is how do we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, our calmer part of us, and just start to suppress the sympathetic nervous system, which is that immune reactive fight, flight, fight. Now, I can tell from a lot of posts in the long haul groups, many of you were living in your sympathetic nervous system before you even got sick. We're modern people. There's a lot of social media. We're juggling lots of balls. We work, we have families, we have social engagements. We're doing lots of things. We're always on the move. We're very active. We have all these things going. We don't have a moment to sit down and rest. We get better when we're in nature, but then we go back to our active lives. That's what many people were living. And then they got this new virus that just amped up their physical immune system to a huge level, and that has spun off into very physical experiences in their sympathetic nervous system. So the question is, if that's happened, which would be normal and natural for something new, I mean, just imagine if somebody you love died. Many of us have had that experience. That's new. We have to adjust to that. Our sympathetic nervous system, which is our stress, not that we have sympathy, is just, everything just gets like this. And some people live that way forever. What if you got mugged? The same way. What if you're in a terrible earthquake or a war, or suddenly everybody in your family lost their job? Familiar COVID shutdowns. Everything can be stressful. That's the sympathetic nervous system. And if we do not have skills to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, that's what we're living in. Does being an elevated sympathetic nervous system kill us? Probably not. We just live in stress for a long time. Most of the symptoms that us long haul people have, and the people who have more severe symptoms, like their racing heart, or they're skipping their heart, or their elevated blood pressure, or their fast heart, or they're tired, or they're breathless, those things aren't going to kill us. They feel like they're going to kill us, but most likely they're not going to kill us, but we don't want to live with that. And so I want to talk to you about how you can make this change. And all of the playlists are talking about that. Everything I'm trying to say to you. How well are these videos received? Very few people are watching them. Isn't that curious? I'm posting them in long haul groups. But we're not hearing back from people who are doing things for themselves. Very little. Some people are trying to change their diet, which is good. That's part of it. Some people are going to therapists. Many therapists are giving them things to calm down. So why aren't they doing things to calm themselves down? Mostly because this is been not connected to the silo approach of medicine. And the Atlantic article is a positive sign that perhaps this will begin to spread through the medical community. We need to breathe better. And what does that mean? I became a Buteco instructor years ago. I had heard about Buteco. I was a naturopath. I worked a lot with people with asthma. Buteco hit the scene in the 1990s. He was a Russian physician. He was dealing with breathlessness that came from asthma, COPD, emphysema, smoking, snoring, sleep apnea, out of breath, breathlessness, exercise-induced asthma, breathlessness. And the medical profession believed that those diseases caused breathlessness. So therefore, common sense, thinking that way, would you treat the disease? However, it was hard to treat some of those diseases. And if you have asthma, you know you were given an inhaler. That's trying to, in some ways, kind of treat the disease. And there are medications given to people with emphysema and COPD and other diseases. If you have sleep apnea, you put on a CPAP machine. In fact, they use a CPAP machine with people with COVID. So they try to treat the symptoms rather than change how people are breathing. And what Buteco did was to say people's breathlessness are not necessarily directly causing, but they are a causative factor in these pulmonary diseases. So if you change your breathing, if you become less breathless, then it's good. You may still have the name of being an asthmatic, sort of like recovering alcoholics. You hear people say, I have a disease, I'm alcoholic, I'm a recovering alcoholic for 20 years. Well, when are you recovered? And that's a question modern people don't ask. I can tell you that most people will say, I'm a long haul COVID sufferer years from now because they have lingering symptoms. And somewhere down the path of doing this, they never stumbled on, learned about, heard about, did, or changed their ability to calm their sympathetic nervous system down, their fright, flight, fight, and freeze, and to activate their parasympathetic nervous system, feeling calm. Now, what happens when we feel calm? Because our mind, emotion, and our body are one, then when we feel calm, our thinking calms down, our emotions are more positive, and our body can function better and therefore even heal some dysfunctions. If we have an arm cut off, being calm doesn't regrow an arm like a salamander. However, being calm can begin to repair the lining of our arteries, Being calm, and we use breathing to get there, can definitely make us less breathless. And being calm when we're less breathless can definitely help us feel less fatigued and less anxious and less nervous and less depressed, with more energy and able to do more. Because the Buteco system was developed to achieve those goals. Not all breathing systems are developed to achieve those goals. When I first was introduced to breathing in the 1970s, it was to hyperventilate in order to stimulate an emotional crisis. That you don't want. That's rebirthing or holotropic breath work. Even Wim Hof, that's used by many free divers along with Buteco or oxygen advantage, is a stimulating type of breathing that's very vigorous and very, very challenging. So Buteco is quite unique. Meditative breathing, yogic breathing, does something that changes you. But Buteco is quite unique because it actually resets the breathing center in your brain back here, and you change from being a breathless person to a person who isn't breathless. And when you're not breathless, you have activated this parasympathetic nervous system. But what is it doing to you? Why is that happening in you? And how do you know if it's happening? And that's important. So the Buteco skills, and on this playlist, and I've given you the connection to it, I have some breathing, informal exercise challenges for you to participate in. One is the first Buteco breathing skill, unblock your nose, because if your nose is blocked, which is a post-COVID symptom, then your breathing respiratory system isn't going to function well to begin with. So that's a good place to start. And then I gave you another challenge, which is the box breathing. That's not Buteco, that's its own unique system. But it's calming your breathing down by breathing in X amount of time, holding your breath the same amount of time, letting it out the same amount of time, holding it the same amount of time, and doing that for a few minutes each day, calming your breathing down. So what does Buteco actually do? How does it reset your breathing center? So for us in common knowledge, we always have to find things that everybody sort of has some experience to. And we know that if anybody has gone up to high altitude, that there's less oxygen up there. And that's what's called altitude sickness. People who are living in the lowland go up where there's less oxygen and they get sick. But why do people who live at high altitudes not get sick? They don't get sick because this brain center back here has a higher CO2 tolerance. And this is talked about in the Atlantic magazine article. And what is the role of a higher CO2 tolerance? When we have a higher CO2 tolerance, we feel less breathless when we have less oxygen. So people at high altitude have less oxygen all the time from birth onward, but they don't feel fatigued. They're not breathless because this brain center has reset to accept a higher level of carbon dioxide tolerance. So if you put an oximeter on their fingers, they're not going to have perhaps 92%. In fact, athletes who train at high altitude or use the oxygen advantage system, which is the extension of Buteco, that is a set of Buteco skills set for people who are not breathless, but who want to improve their performance, their breathing performance, their athletic performance. It's a simulation of high altitude breath training. It resets the breathing center. It increases our carbon dioxide tolerance, and therefore it decreases our oxygen saturation in our blood. And that's the operative word, in our blood. So when you are putting the oximeter on you, it is indicating what's your oxygen in your blood. But having oxygen in your blood doesn't mean you're having oxygen in your tissues or your organs, your brain, your heart, your lungs, your muscles. But when you have high carbon dioxide tolerance, the oxygen is liberated from your red blood cells and sent out into your tissues and your organs. Your brain opens up the alveoli in our lungs and the blood vessels in your heart. It opens up all 100,000 miles of blood vessels, and the oxygen circulates through those blood vessels and then leaks out of those blood vessels into our tissues and our organs. And therefore, when we have a high CO2 tolerance, we are not as breathless, we don't fatigue as easily, we can go faster and farther and longer without being breathless. Is that something you want to achieve for yourself in recovering? In fact, because it opens up the blood vessels in your heart, the oxygen feeds your heart, which means your heart isn't working as hard to pump your blood through constricted blood vessels, which happens when you are in fright, flight, fight, or freeze mode. Your blood vessels close down, which means your heart has to beat harder, which means you have more pressure in your blood vessels and arteries, which elevates your high blood pressure. So you want to develop CO2 tolerance. And you do that by using a set of skills. You can go on YouTube and find many of the Buteco skills. Or if you find this post on Facebook, you can PM me and I'll work with you. But there's another gas that resetting this breathing center creates, and we can create it, and that's nitric oxide. It's the great vasodilator. We've all experienced it. We just haven't known we've experienced it. And what you don't know, you don't know. You don't know, you don't know it. It's incompetency, unconscious incompetency, or conscious incompetency. But when you know it, and you can use it as a skill, then you are activating your parasympathetic nervous system. So nitric oxide is produced in two ways. It's produced in our sinuses, and it's produced under all of our skin when we go out in the sun and we get sleepy. That is the nitric oxide that glows white under all of our skin, and it permeates into our body, and from the periphery to our core, it opens up our blood vessels so that our oxygen can get all the way out to our tippy toes and fingertips. So when you feel that, your hands warm. Many of us who are COVID long haulers are saying they have cold hands, cold feet. So you want to develop nitric oxide to open up your cardiovascular system. Going out for 20 minutes without sunscreen, lying in the sun and getting sleepy is one way to help you do that. The other way, and you can go to YouTube to find many, humming and nitric oxide. Put the tongue to your roof of your mouth, vibrate here as you exhale, and inhale through your nose, because the nitric oxide is produced in here. And every time you breathe it in, you're distributing it through your body. So when you do the Buteco exercises, you are doing a normal inhale with a slight exhale, and then just pitching your nose, and then breathing in your nose. And little by little, this helps you increase your carbon dioxide tolerance. And how do you know that? Because right now, if you're feeling a lot of your sympathetic nervous system, count how many breaths per minute you're doing. When I first started with Buteco, I thought that I breathed pretty good. I wasn't a mouth breather. I was a belly breather. I was a nose breather. I was breathing 20 breaths per minute. That was normal, 12 to 20 breaths. That's normal. So I wasn't concerned, except that I started to learn more. When the parasympathetic nervous system is activated and we're breathing more efficiently and we have better carbon dioxide tolerance and the nitric oxide production distribution is better, our breathing slows down to 6 to 12 breaths per minute because we're not breathless. And when we're not breathless, we don't feel we need to take in that next breath as rapidly. People with asthma are always gasping for breath. They're trying to get more oxygen, but if you put an oximeter on them, they have fine oxygen. They don't know. Nobody's told them. They haven't been trained in. They haven't utilized for themselves Buteco skills, which will help them increase their carbon dioxide tolerance and help them produce and distribute nitric oxide. And when they do that, their breathing slows down. There's more pause. And one way to do that, even if you throw your hands up in the air and go, never going to spend any time doing this, just try exhaling more slowly. So you inhale a little bit and you exhale more slowly. Do it so that it's natural. Or do it for 1 minute and then see how you feel. If you feel calm or you've activated your parasympathetic nervous system, the things we do have to help us feel better. Because when we feel better, we need to maintain feeling better longer. So everything I've said in all of these videos is about reducing the unpleasant symptoms. Those are episodes. We don't feel well. So if our heart is racing and we're also doing a lot of breathlessness stuff, how do you calm your heart? You just start to calm your breathing. And calming your breathing can be as simple as I'm going to breathe in 3 or 4 and I'm going to breathe out 7 or 8. And I'm going to do that for what? 10 seconds, 20 seconds, a minute? Can you do that sufficiently so you calm yourself down? We live in our body. Your doctor doesn't live in it. Nobody lives in it but you. You have to take charge of your mind, your emotions, and your body. You don't have to do it like a drill sergeant. That's the sympathetic nervous system. You do it with tender, loving care to yourself. And you do it by utilizing skills so that you become consciously competent. You become a skilled human being, which you thrive on. And if you were a skilled human being before you got COVID, and you were still wired to the brim, and you do things that activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and you're a calmer you don't change. You just do those things that you're competent with in a calmer, more relaxed manner. So when you read about the dysautonomia, medical term, it's all about our autonomic nervous system. Medical professions identified it. If you have it as a diagnosis, that's fine. And if you go to the medical profession and get treated with medications, that's fine. Notice when you read that article how much of it is talking about lifestyle change. So what I'm saying to you, as a naturopath for 50 years, as a person who's worked with thousands of people, more and more and more people since the 90s have developed sympathetic nervous system disorders. People are stressed to the brim. And when they got COVID, it just stressed us more. Was I a stressed person before I got COVID? No, not particularly. However, some of us have very unique pre-existing conditions. Mine is a genetic issue, and that predisposed me for having an immune vulnerability to catching a new virus. Or it was just dumb luck, or bad luck, or wrong place at the wrong time. I don't stress about that. I work to help my body, my emotions, and my thinking to live in my parasympathetic nervous system. I do that with many, many, many different homeopathics, herbal blends, meditations, living meditations, primarily having reset my breathing center. That has been phenomenally helpful. So, the two things as we wind down. If you go no further than these two things, do more and more nose breathing. If you're doing mouth breathing, you're not bringing the nitric oxide into your body. And the mouth breathing stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. So do actually three things. Nose breathing more. And if you find you have to breathe out your mouth, breathe in and out of your mouth. And then when you remember, go back to nose breathing. And every time you breathe in, you're drawing in nitric oxide, which is opening up your your cardiovascular system. You're vasodilating. Nose breathing. Do your best to switch from belly breathing, from chest breathing to belly breathing. Just put your hand on your chest, a hand on your belly. Your belly should rise up more. Your chest should be fairly still, because this is an inefficient part of your lungs. The better part of your lungs to use is below your nipple line. So put your hand on your belly and just comfortably try to breathe down there rather than up here. And when you catch yourself breathing up here, just try to change it. When you catch yourself breathing in and out your mouth, just try to change it to nose to nose. Thank goodness we don't have 5 or 6 things like in and out of our ears, or in and out of our toes, or in and out of our eyes. It's just either your nose or your mouth, your chest or your belly. So you can change this. This is not hard work, but you have to choose to do it. And you don't have to do it so you're struggling. That's your sympathetic nervous system. It's, I have to do it perfectly. No, you don't. You just have to keep doing it and willing to make changes gently and kindly to yourself. Was there a third one? Remembering to breathe in and breathe in the nitric oxide. But I gave you some other skills, didn't I? Humming, looking on YouTube, drawing it in, Buteco, doing the unblock the nose, going to YouTube and finding the other Buteco things. Lots of skills to activate what is calmer in you. When your mind chooses to do these things, it gives a message to your emotions. And it gives a message to our body and our body's function. And that message is very simple.